Hi, hello. This is Mark Delacruz, product lead of Lorelink, talking to you yet again here on our Twitch channel. Apologize for the slight delay in getting the stream started today. I've got 16 things that I was running behind, and so I had to dot a bunch of I's and cross a bunch of T's before I could get everything started. So, I should be audible. I should have captions to confirm that with my tech crew. And once we have that confirmed, I will go ahead and make myself visible, audible, and captioned. Awesome. All right, let's bring my face in. There we are. And basically, we are here today. I don't see YouTube yet, though. YouTube should be started. It's telling me it's streaming. Oh, it's private, that's why. YouTube, why did you make that private? We want the people to see. Don't use that thumbnail, though. Well, I can't get out of that thumbnail, so... right now, we'll grab one of those pictures we'll do. All the joys of running a Twitch stream. 1600 technical issues that happen only exactly when you click the start button. There, that'll do for now. Okay. There we go. That's hidden. That's available. All right. I am here today talking to Thomas Marshall of Turtle and Phoenix Entertainment. Basically talking to him about his tabletop role-playing game that he has created called Djura of the Twilight Age. It is basically a anthropomorphic role-playing game that is more than just combat. It's basically social intrigue. Basically rewards ingenuity and creativity as part of a shared storytelling experience. To paraphrase his own words, right back at him, possibly stealing his thunder. So I suppose I should allow him to speak. So I will take him off of mute in here. Boop-a-doop. And now he should be able to introduce himself and basically talk and basically share your voice with the people.
Hey Mark, thanks for the great introduction. That was wonderful. I don't feel like you stole my thunder at all. You took a lot of the pressure off, in fact. So I do appreciate that. Yeah, I'm the game designer for Djura, the Twilight Age with Turtle and Phoenix Entertainment.
Awesome. So basically, the first question I'm going to ask, just for people who basically may not have heard of Djura yet. So, what is your back of the box blurb for Djura? I need to turn you up though.
Sure. So I think, at its core, Djura is about experiencing adventures and stories as an anthropomorphic animal. It's a tabletop role-playing game where players can uncover the secrets behind their shattered history and become legends. They're an animal people on the brink of subjugation by fanatical wolf knights, bloodthirsty abominations, tyrannical despots, and would-be demigods. So you'll explore the world. There's mighty airships, flying fish, dreamlike spirits. There's a great world tree, the burrow mazes underground, lost cities surrounded by living shadow, ancient monoliths of unrealized technological wonder. The Djura survive in a near dystopia between cyberpunk and the Dark Ages.
Oh, that's cool. That's great. So between cyberpunk and the Dark Ages is definitely an interesting, time gap to put it in. So basically, what would you think? What are the things that you would say makes Djura unique? Basically, obviously everyone thinks that theirs is the best role-playing game ever, etc., etc. But basically, when you set off to do something with this? So what's the unique niche that you want Djura to fill?
Sure. First I want to clarify: everyone who designs a role-playing game, their role-playing game is the best. If you've gone through the gauntlet and made a game, as you have, Mark, and I have, right? you put everything into it, so it's the best game. So everybody out there, they do absolutely have the best game. So for Djura, though, what makes it unique? It's a lot of games out there with anthropomorphic animals as player characters. I grew up playing those kinds of games, and the things that felt flat to me that I didn't even realize until I was an adult were that we had a lot of attributes that weren't tied to any sort of specific real gameplay. And when you're an animal, it was almost superficial. Like there were things that were, that were like if you're a turtle, you have a shell, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the bonuses or a lot of the things that you got from being that animal were always pointed towards like the core mechanic of that game. And the core mechanic of a lot of the role-playing games that I had played in the 90s and 2000s, right, were very combat-oriented, right? They were focused on combat, not all of them, but... And so what I did was I created an attribute system that I thought sort of touched the gamut of like gameplay in multiple genres, right? Not just combat. Though combat, right? Combat, you can do combat. Not just social intrigue, but also like, investigation. What it really means to have a bunch of skills and attributes that related to how you understand yourself, your discipline, your focus, your courage, your fortitude, right? And so that's what the attributes are meant to do, sort of allow you to build a character that you feel meets the type of archetype or type of persona that you want to be in that.
So basically, it's not just your class that defines who you are and what you can do. A lot of that basically comes from who you kind of start from character creation, from whatever you what you pick as a species, starts kind of defining some of that in terms of what you can do and what you who you are, as it were.
Yeah. So character creation is pretty simple. It is you pick an animal, or we call them Djura, right? So you pick an animal, and from there you have a base set of attributes along with natural abilities of that type of animal and things that would be considered disadvantages of being that kind of animal. And so those are based on a lot of research for both the animal in our real world and some of the fun like media or stories that humanity has created around these animals, right? And so collectively, people who have played the game so far really like it. They feel like they really enjoy the fact that they have things that give them great benefits, and that things that make the story more interesting because they're a raven and there's something shiny, and now they have to try hard not to deviate from what everybody's trying to do, right? To sort of go after the shiny thing.
Yeah, basically, it's one of those things that we've a lot of systems that feels like have kind of lost somewhat in, basically, at least a lot of the major systems have lost in their push for balanced gameplay and things like that. You end up with a lot of characters where everyone has bonuses, but not many people have negatives. Basically, you don't have disadvantages or anything like that as much as that, basically, as you used to, and a lot of those. Like even in your stat thing, where basically like in D&D, used to be basically you might start with a stat that's a 6 or an 8, and basically that would end up being a defining part of your character, is the fact that they don't have great strength, they're not intelligent, they don't have good constitution. Why don't they have that, etc., etc. And a lot of times those disadvantages can help define the character and help give the character something to do that isn't just succeed, as it were. Introduce more peril or complications to it. So that's awesome. So you mentioned ravens. What are some of the other ones that you have, basically species wise?
I mean, for the game, for launch, for the core set, I'm planning on 72 animals kind of out of the gate.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, it's quite a bit, and then for supplements there'll be additional. But yeah, so there's been a lot of research. So I mean, it's a lot. A lot of people on play tests, I generally ask them. So there's a lot of fan favorites out there, right? Like raccoons, cats, dogs, squirrels, Red Panda is a big one right now. Panda Bear is a big one right now. Foxes, of course, top tier, right? Everybody's fox.
Yep.
Some people like bears or alligators. They want to be big, strong, kind of scary Djura. So it really just depends, and that's what I wanted, right? As a kid, one of the big inspirations for this was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness that Palladium, Wojcik and Kevin Zambada came out with back in the 80s, and my friends and I, we had a lot of fun with that. But when I took my lens to the game, I was looking for something that wasn't everything. I can hear you.
Okay. It's telling me it's connecting to chat. It's disconnected, reattempting to connect. Okay. All right. Hi, welcome back. Basically, are we still? Basically, are we in fact still live, or did just disconnect? I can see 20 in chat now. We've reconnected the chat. Maybe. No, it's saying attempting to reconnect. Twitch crashed, but YouTube is still up. That's awesome. Is Twitch just down for everybody? Did we just time this perfectly? Catch a Twitch crash. Okay, we're back. Awesome, we're back. Woo! Hi.
Yay!
But basically, like you're talking about, 72 different animals. And how many different? You have. Basically, I've got a rotating. I want basically for the stream. I'm like, I want some visual interest, so I pulled a lot of the cool images and artwork that you've created and you've put up on Facebook, which has got a lot of the class.
I'm sorry, the artists who worked on there. Let's make sure that's absolutely clear.
Yes.
I did not create any of the illustrations. I saw maybe some of the emblems, but not the illustrations themselves.
You can go ahead and shout out the artist.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't. I don't think I can see the ones that you're seeing.
Oh, basically, I've got a lot of the basically the ones you've used on Facebook. Basically, the class summaries like Thug, basically Thug, Smuggler.
Yeah, Gus and Mesa does an amazing job. Oh yeah, tremendous job.
Pirates, and I think I've got the book cover, or at least what used to be your book cover.
Yeah, those are from Nordeva is where you find her online. Yeah, she's an incredibly talented artist from Spain. Another one, if you see the Wilder, that's the frog, or the Trickster, that's the fox. That's Isabella. Isapug is her handle online. She's tremendously talented artist too. Very fortunate. We live in an age of so many talented artists.
Yeah, it's amazing. You can reach out, contact all these artists, talk to them, and actually have them produce art. And basically, they respond to feedback, and you pay them, and you actually support real human beings, as opposed to other stuff. No shade thrown.
I know what we're in, right, with artificial intelligence, with intelligent art. But I was an artist. I started off as an artist and an animator too, so I understand. Plus, I don't know, there's an element to what they do where they can, they breathe their own life into the artist's dreams, right? And I think that's what makes them special.
Definitely.
Their thumbprint on the art.
Yeah, there's always you can get exactly what you want, but sometimes you need someone to tell you exactly what you want isn't exactly what you need, and basically to give you something beyond what you want, which is always awesome when you get something you're like, oh, that's even more incredible than I was thinking.
Oh, absolutely, completely agreed. Yeah, I haven't shared it yet, but there's a an environment piece I got 2 weeks ago that's exactly what happened. So yeah, it's a delight when an artist really goes through and they risk it, right? Because they know it's not part of the brief. But when it comes out, they're like, oh wow, you really fired all lasers on that thing. It's great.
Basically, but where I was going with basically you have the 72 races, and then you have stuff like the Terra Stalker, basically the thug, the smuggler. Those are classes. Basically, I don't know your terminology.
Sure, yeah. There, so the I have careers and paths. So
Okay.
like, if you think somebody's a career criminal, right? So criminal is the
Mm-hmm.
career. Criminal are they? That's the path. So are
Okay.
they a thief? Are they a thug? Are they a smuggler? Are they a con artist? Like what kind of criminal are they? Those are the different paths.
Also, basically, and those just add additional abilities and other things on top of what they're getting from their species, as it were.
Yeah. So there's a whole. I don't think I've shared. I may have shared one video that sort of teased at it, but each of them does have a tree, so they can sort of define how they want to build out that particular type of thug or thief or tourist hunter. And then they'll also be able to, after collecting so many abilities and learning so many abilities, learn abilities from other paths or careers out there.
Mm-hmm.
So this way, if they okay, they're a pirate, but they find out that they've been hunting a lot of monsters, so they think some monster hunting abilities would be useful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they'll actually have the opportunity to go through a story, learn from a master, and potentially learn that ability. So,
Awesome. So basically, there's basically given that many basically races and classes and things like that. That definitely means that basically every player is basically it's going to be it'd be hard to have duplicates in a group. Basically, even if people end up with the same species and same class, they could be going down different paths. Basically, or different same species, same career. They could have different. Basically, they could take different paths in that career. They could have everything. So there's a lot of different unique ways that a person could play it. Um, so basically, how do you basically what's basically because here's the $1 million question that always gets asked is did you basically was balance a concern between all of those, or were you more what basically the GM, um I'm assuming that GM is the name for the person who runs the game. I'm realizing that basically sometimes other people have different names for the game master storyteller. um but basically, is that a GM concern where basically it's like everything is relatively balanced, um, or you're like, you know what, you may break the system, but that's up to the GM to basically the GM will be able to handle that with the tools we give them.
sure. No, that's a really great question. I'm going to start with what I call that particular role, um, and I call it the storyteller. And I
Okay.
call it the storyteller kind of an homage, or I'm sorry, yeah, just because of the work that World of Darkness, White Wolf Games did back in the
Mm-hmm.
90s.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I transitioned from like Palladium and Marvel and the Star Wars D6 games, the Western games, that's what I transitioned to is their games. And the
Mm-hmm.
role of storyteller is where I realized that you know what they were potentially allowing the players to bring to one another was more than it is a game. It is a game, and I know there's a lot of hot debate on it right now. But with this particular game, I am looking for that person to not only be a teacher, but like also to help them understand that they are part of creating a story together. Right? And so that's why I want to use the term to help reinforce like it's not just a dice game, it's not just a numbers crunching game, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a game where you guys are gonna have a fun story together. You're gonna make a story together. But let me go back to your second question. The real question
Mm-hmm.
was so since the game is a game where it's not just linearly like it's not just focused on when a character rolls reaction, which is what we call initiative, to when everything when all opponents of the conflict are gone, right? It's not just that. It is all the moments in between. The balance comes down to like how they like how they are in their role. So they are balanced from the abilities, their skills and their abilities. They balance like they're linearly balanced, and they work great. And people who played it really do enjoy it. They do like it. There's a lot of synergy between abilities as they go. But what they do, like how they play that character, is meant to be based on how that career is built, right? So if you pick a smuggler, right? A smuggler is not a bare knuckle boxer. They're not the same thing. But what I've learned going to a lot of conventions is that a lot of role-playing game players have been conditioned to, oh, there's somebody fighting. My role, regardless if I'm a mouse, and that thing is a lion, is to go up and punch you. They've been preconditioned to
Yep.
oh, my role, everybody's fighting, my role is to fight. Like, no, use your brains. You're a mouse. Use the tools that you have at your disposal to either get to safety or to help everybody else get through this conflict, right? It doesn't always have to be punch to the death. This isn't punch a thing, get experience, get stronger, punch bigger things, get experience, get stronger. This is not that kind of a game.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that. You can't play it that way. But it's designed to be more holistic, right? Where everyone potentially could play the type of story they want, no matter what their role is. And they can work together. So they have been given tools to be like, oh, I'm a warrior, but you will have tools where you won't be as inept in a social situation. You won't be the best in social situations, but you won't be completely at a loss, right? And the opposite is true for people who are great at social situations. They'll have tools to survive combat or to be able to get to do clever things during a combat situation. But that's not where they're supposed to shine. So if anybody who thinks like, well, in every situation I should be great at it, I don't think that's the right mindset to bring to a role-playing game. But again, as the deficient game master will say, or deficient dungeon master will say, it's your game. You can play it however you want. Right?
That is basically always the joy of basically like, hey, basically you kind of put this out there in the wild and you let other people interact with it, and then you find out what they bring to it, what they take from it. Basically, so it sounds like basically you've been doing basically in terms of basically you're talking about a lot about conventions and things like that. You've done extensive kind of playtesting both basically in public and in private with this game, basically to get to iron out all those things, to find out this is what people want to do, things like that. So basically, how much of that have you done in terms of?
I mean, a lot. I don't know. I don't know what the right numbers. A lot of conventions and a lot of games locally. They're always, I always learn whenever I do a large convention and I'll run, what is it, 8 to 16 games, like in a couple-day period. There's a lot of learnings there, right? And so then you have to take the time to kind of go back and rework a lot of things that you're like, oh, okay, this is like, I solved that problem from the last time, and now I have to solve these problems from this time, So I feel like it's getting to a really good spot. At the last convention, there was some really good but minor feedback on something that was kind of like, we're at the point of, what's the problem in the company? Oh, we need square watermelons, right? So that we don't have to worry about the problem. Like, that's like, I feel like we're not, we're not quite there, but I feel like I see that on the horizon.
That's cool. So in terms, basically, we talked a lot about basically mechanics and balancing and things like that. In terms of basically and world building, things like that, which way do you, like, a lot of people will be like, oh, this game is basically it's mostly a storytelling game and it's got some few mechanics scattered in, and some people are like, oh no, this is a mechanics heavy game and there's a little bit of the world building tossed in. Do you feel like you've managed to hit the balance of that, or you basically do you feel like you started with more basically you're more mechanics based, or do you feel basically that informs the theme, or do you feel you're more theme informing mechanics, as it were?
Sure, that's a really good question. So back in 2000, I started writing a series, I started writing a Bible and then, scripts for an animated series based on, a story that eventually evolved into the story of Djura, okay, and the characters involved, because there are novels that I'm writing alongside, that I started writing before I started making the role-playing game. And so when I sat down to make the role-playing game, it was a very different mental exercise, because it started with, okay, we have animals, right? We have things that are alive and people are going to be playing against them. So what are the attributes that matter? Like, you know what I mean? Which ones are garbage? Which ones would a player really never interact with? And which ones are important? And that was a really important and long exercise sort of coming up. So I feel as though they've been evolving separately, the lore and the mechanics. Now, as I begin to merge them, that's where the challenge comes in, right? Because I have a lot of 20 years of lore kind of built up, right? And I know better than to drown someone in that. Plenty of understanding that nobody wants that. So find the right balance of what sort of nuggets to slip people so that the games are interesting, that there's always some sort of foreshadowing in the backgrounds and the artwork, in like characters, how the characters interact with the players, what their roles are. Like those all feed into how the world should build itself. And I think that's going to be a challenge that some storytellers might have, depending on what tools they find useful when they get the kit, right, when they get the game, versus the ones that they just like, hey, this is just how I run my games. But it is intended, exploration and discovery are huge tenets of the themes of this game. It's a world where the Djura, they've lost their history, some time back. And so they're sort of rediscovering their world, they're rediscovering their world. This massive shadowy thing sort of swept across the land. They call it the Shadow Band. Sometimes whole cities disappeared, sometimes Djura disappeared, and a lot of people forgot a lot of important things about their world. And so, Djura began to distrust one another, became insular, forming separate communities. And then there's all this lost technology out there that nobody kind of remembered even existed. So the mechanics were built separate. So, down the road, if somebody's like, oh, I want to build a game that is, a traditional fantasy Lord of the Rings kind of setting, the game design can lend itself to that. We've got rules for things that would happen. How do we deal with animal handling? How do we deal with piloting vessels versus piloting vehicles versus mounts versus I have a pet? How do we deal with statuses such as mental statuses versus your acuity statuses versus your physical or personality statuses? So there are rules, but I did everything I could to sort of boil them down so that a person at the table wasn't inundated with having to turn to page 375, or was it 357? That is something that, because I personally get lost in blocks of text, I do. And so I have to have things color-coded, I have to have things of different sizes to sort of tell me the importance. And then I have to have tools that make it quick, because I know how it is when you're on the other side of the table, as you do as well. When somebody's challenged with looking something up, we're all growing from the experience. And so it's important to me. So hopefully, I don't know if I answered your question or if I deviated too far, Mark. You'll have to let me know.
No, you definitely answered the question in terms of, it sounds like you put a lot of thought into the world and you put a lot of thought into the mechanics, but you didn't necessarily sacrifice one for the other at any point. You tried to keep the risk to keep them somewhat separated in terms of developing them. So you end up with some basically, so you have some cool mechanics and things like that, but you're not necessarily like, oh no, I can't do that, or balance reasons I can't do that, or this can't exist in the world because I don't have a mechanic for it. You allowed yourself to be creative on both sides of the basically of that divide, as it were. Cool. So in basically talking about the storyteller and things like that. You talked a little bit about it in terms of what role you feel the storyteller is running in this game. So it sounds like the role that you're looking for the storyteller to provide to the players is that of a storyteller, where they're not necessarily an antagonist or basically they're the protagonist. They're not there to basically they're there to keep the story going in terms of basically keep things providing challenges and things like that, but ultimately letting or basically helping the players succeed. Or are there more antagonistic type systems, like basically, for example, the 2d20 system? A lot of basically there's a lot of systems in there where basically if the players do stuff, they have to give points to to the GM in order to enable the GM to do nasty things back to them. So it's a more of a push-pull type situation where basically it's the, oh yeah, sure, well, I'll let you get away with that, but you have to let me basically do something, you're going to pay for that later. Star Wars. It's another one where there's the light side points and the dark side points, where basically every time you use a light side point, it flips to a dark side point. And basically those dark side points can be used by the NPCs. Basically, how would you say your system kind of falls in that kind of scale? Is it more basically storytelling, basically enabling the players? Is it more slightly antagonistic, where basically as things get better for the players, the GM gets more antagonistic, as it were?
So it's definitely more player empowering, or it's intended to be. So Genesis, or especially the Star Wars, the Final Fantasy Star Wars game. I'm sorry, Fantasy Flight. Sorry, Fantasy Flight. I was like, wait, sorry guys. No cease and desist here.
They don't exist really anymore. They're Edge Studios, so you're fine.
Okay. Yeah, so that was a huge inspiration because, when just before the pandemic, after you and I finished our stint with the law, I was playing that online, and I really liked what they did with their advantage system. But to me, and don't get me wrong, like a lot of what I do with the mechanics were definitely from a foundation of what they started. Okay, there's no doubt. All kudos to them. But what I did was I looked for ways to make the system cleaner, especially the storytelling aspect. So instead of advantage, I have a system, and I have a symbol for it called karma. And what it does is, if it's rolled, and you have an odd number, just a 1, right? A single karma that a player would roll, outside of the successes that they would roll with their. It's a symbol-based dice collection upgrade, right? The player would sort of define, even if they failed the roll, what would happen story-wise, and the storyteller is supposed to kind of help them out. So, for instance, we were playing this weekend, and one of the characters, Fennec Fox, was trying to sneak into the back room of an auction house, okay, to steal some things, okay, and she got caught. And so while she was being sort of dragged back into the main area, because she was supposed to be one of the guests, she talked her way through that part. She tried to knock the person in, but she failed the roll. Okay, whiffed it. But she rolled a karma. Okay, so well, you missed the roll. You tried to punch this guy, you missed the roll. So what? And so we sat there and we gave her an opportunity to sort of define what, like, story-wise. Well, she's like, well, can we just say that the punch actually, hit him? And I know you actually missed, right? So what opportunity happened story-wise that is to your benefit? And he was like, oh well, one of the carriages outside, which are strapped to these large beetle creatures, right? In this world, noticed something, was spooked and sort of started going crazy. And so one of the other people in the back room was like, oh hey, don't just push her back in the room and let's get these beetles before they run off with our goods, right? And so while she did miss the roll, she wasn't punished by the guy being like, this person just tried to punch me, right? There was a story opportunity. So she still failed. She still got pushed back into the main room where everybody was socializing. But, she didn't have to face the same repercussions as she just punched and missed, So that's an example. But yeah, giving the players an opportunity to sort of define that moment of what could happen. And the storyteller has the same options. So I think what Star Wars did with their light and dark side points was good. But me role-playing that, I would feel terrible if I had all these points and like, oh, now suddenly I just get to, like, you're a storyteller, you always can just make things more difficult for the players. Absolutely. Like, I don't need points for that. I don't need points for that. But if I roll a single karma and the opposing player hasn't, and they see that, well, there's no question in their mind what's a coming, right? They're like, oh, okay, well, this is not going to be great.
Basically, so you have kind of a level kind of playing field between both the storyteller and the players, in terms of they both roll the same type of dice, they gain the same kind of benefits from it, but basically your system provides a lot of yes and opportunities, essentially allowing them to be like, basically no but, basically, and keep the story basically no but or yes and type situations where it's like something bad happened, but here's the way you can basically here's the way you can keep the story going. Basically, this isn't necessarily the end of it. We can keep going. Okay, so that's cool. Good.
Yeah, like I think that's what Genesis and Star Wars opened my mind to, the idea that the dice themselves don't just have to be statistical results for the purposes of defining success and failure. They're good for that. They're great for that. But to incorporate like, oh, this particular symbol allows for an opportunity for storytelling. Hey, that's wonderful, right? Like, what a delight, you know. And so, sort of trying to find a way to make that system work with the dice. It took me about a year to kind of get things clean to where I started designing this back in January 2021, and it took me maybe about a year or so to get the dice part kind of refined to the way it was like it is today. Been working really well.
This game, we mentioned the dice. We mentioned the dice a couple of times, and I've seen them because they're on Facebook. You've advertised them on Facebook and things like that. So you have a custom dice system for Djura. You want to talk about that a little bit? Basically, what does that exactly look like?
No, that's thanks. No, I appreciate that. So we use boxes to determine a player's attributes. So let's use charm for example. So I've got 5 empty boxes for charm, and let's say I'm a decently charmed character. I've got 3 boxes filled out. Okay, so I got 3 levels in charm, and I want to do something charming. I want to tell a joke. So for each of those boxes in my attributes, I would roll a d6, and we call that it's a blue die. We call it the natural die. And the natural die's got symbols for either success, a single karma, or a blank, right? And so they roll the dice. Okay, that's great. But what if you've been to clown college for a week or 2? Well, underneath that attribute, there are a series of skills associated with being charming, like allure, like are you good at flirting, or humor, right? Or are you persuasive, or do you have a good, strong presence around people? So there are about 5 skills in most of the attributes that a person can learn, right? To be better at that particular part of being charming in all the attributes. So if they did, let's say they went to clown college for a week, and they got their 1 dot in humor, okay? So normally I would have 3 blue die, right? But since I've got that dot in humor, I would take one of the blue die and I would update it from a d6 to a d10, which is purple. We call that a skill die. So I have 1 purple die and 2 blue die. And the purple die has a lot more interesting things that can happen on it, okay? But there's still the opportunity for failure on it, okay? And so as you gain skills, you sort of convert your blue dies to purple dies. Or if you don't have any more blue dies you can upgrade, it would be, and you got more skill than you have attribute, and that would be a blue die. If you're a professional, let's say you're a professional clown, okay? Your career is a trickster, and so one of your abilities allows you at level 3 in humor to be a professional sort of at being humorous. So on the left side of the character sheets, there's this hexagon. And if you have that filled in, then you're considered a professional at that skill. And so you'll add a D12, which we call the professional die. It's red to that pool. So now you have 1 red, 3 purple, and maybe no blue left, okay? And the red die has really amazing things that can happen. The purple and the red die have the opportunity to roll a critical die. It's right now it's a star shape. So if you roll a star shape, when you're at early levels, you can only roll up to 1 critical die. But if you roll the star shape, you get like 2 successes, and you get to roll a critical die, which has a lot of other cool things on it. In a nutshell, that's it. There's 4 dice. There are 5 symbols to remember, and that's it. So it's actually pretty simple. Most people get it after about 10 minutes of sitting down and rolling dice.
So you've avoided basically this Genesis Star Wars type system of there also are negative dice that also get thrown at the player. They have to deal with basically doing a bunch of math and things like that. It's like, okay, I've got 2 blues and 3 purples, and then these yellow evil dice, which do bad things to me, and they brought more failures or difficulties or things like that.
No, it's generally if one player character rolls successes, it's just against the number of successes rolled against them. The same kind of dice. I think I know why think I know why they did it, but I'm not for certain, because they have other games that utilize a lot of the symbols that we saw on their dice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's unclear to me if that was like just an overall game design, like, hey, all Star Wars games are going to have this for successes and this for threats, and you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so they just try to keep that the same. So if you played all 3 games, it's easy to remember. But I found that to be the most challenging part of playing Star Wars. I love the system. I love this. I mean, who doesn't love Star Wars, right? It's great. But that was the most challenging part, was sort of, okay, we did the role, exciting part now, where the math of this game, of Djura, is pretty immediate. The math of that game, very challenging.
Oh yeah, you would hit that point and be like, okay, I've got these successes, these failures, but those failures count as 2 or basically as 1, or those are really bad, and basically, but that's just bad. Basically, I still succeed, but that's a bad result in addition. Yeah, basically that was always the problem with basically. It was like you had this fistful of dice, and you would be adding dice. You'd be like, basically, more dice wasn't necessarily good. It could be worse or better. It was hard to tell. Like, it sounds like in your system, it's really, really straightforward. If you have more dice, you're good. Basically, you're better. If you have bigger dice, you're better. Basically, you roll the result, you check it against your successes, and you basically then you deal with the repercussions of what happened from there. You got the karma and things like that that can rescue failures from the jaws of defeat, as it were. Awesome. So basically, in terms of it sounds like basically you've been working on this. You said for almost basically like the world itself, like almost over 20 years. Basically, the mechanics themselves have taken you probably. How long would you say you spent on those? Sad crying sounds. Got it. Okay.
Well, I mean, so I, like every other game designer that's not working for, full time,
Mm-hmm.
it takes time, because you have to make it, then you have to test it. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think the place where I put myself, where most game designers I don't think should do, is I knew what careers I wanted in the game. Like looking far enough, not just this core set, but like in supplements.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it was important to design them all because they needed to be unique and different from one another. And as I built them, they helped inform me on what other careers kind of should be doing, as opposed to what these careers do, right? I didn't have to go back and be like 2 years later, like, oh gosh, I designed this career and this breaks my game. And I think that's to me what takes the most time now, is going back and looking at the wide view. Because I don't want to be like, all right, everybody, print off these 7 pages, and that's how you're going to patch your game. And I'm definitely not going to release book 2.0 for you to have to buy, like, a couple years after I make this game, so I'm trying to avoid that. And I don't advise that people do that. I don't. But I'm in a different place in my life than a lot of people who are making role-playing games, I think. I'm older and have a stable job, right? And my wife who supports me. So, I think all those things sort of play into, when you're designing a game.
What, designing a tabletop role-playing game doesn't make you an instant millionaire? How disappointing to find out.
I know. I should have bought the Mogwai. I feel like that would have been a better buy. A better choice.
So what would you say has been the hardest part about basically designing this RPG, either basically mechanics or themes or other stuff, or basically playtesting? What's been the part where you're like, basically this is the part you dread doing, or it's just the most time consuming part?
So I don't consider myself like a public figure. So doing this with you is, to me, like a step out, And years ago I did, right? But I nowadays I don't. And even when we worked together, it was more like trying to put the team first. And so
I think 2020 did that to a lot of us.
Yeah, I think you're right. So I know that the community needs to understand what the game is, and I know the best way to do that. I think the best way to do that is through video, motion. And I treat that as secondary to designing the game. Like, everything becomes an excuse. Like, I probably shouldn't go out and play test with people at the game store, because I should be spending time designing the game. And the truth is, you do have to carve out time to market your game. which I waited forever to do. I never felt as though I had enough to kind of share with everyone. And then I just kind of bit the bullet this year and really started pushing out content and trying to engage an audience. Because you have to have that. You can have the best game in the world, but if nobody knows about it, right? Nobody, it can be tough, right? It can be really tough if you're sort of putting everything on that. So to me, none of it's easy. I haven't done the print part yet. I got to visit. Real quick story. Like 2 years back, Kevin Simbata was hosting, and Sean. Sorry, Sean, I don't remember your last name. You're amazing though. But they were hosting a house for Palladium Games in the Detroit area, right? In Detroit. And so I wanted to go there and thank them for, making my childhood fun, buy some of their cool games, and let them know I was working on this project. And I was there for a few hours and really great. They offered food for everybody, got to meet some cool people, play some cool games. Then as I was about to head out the door, because, I want to drive home, I just want to say, hey, let me talk to Kevin. Kevin sat me down, and he doesn't know me from Adam. He sat me down for 2 hours and talked about the publishing business.
Oh, wow.
And it was great. It was totally unexpected. Incredibly nice guy. I mean, really, really grounded game designer. He's an artist. He's like triple threat on all sides, right? Like he's really great. But he sat down, he took some time with me and really opened my eyes to a side of the business that sometimes we take for granted. Like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna reach out to this one place that says they do it all. And you're kind of like, oh, is that the best place to do it? When there's really a large element to paper production, or depending on the type of game you make, dice production, right? That deals with the global economy and wars that are going on. A lot of different, pandemics. So there are a lot of things that he sort of helped establish with me that I need to pay attention to. And it's still challenging no matter what. I think no matter what you do, you really just have to treat it. Hey, I'm designing a game. It's going to be a marathon. It's not a sprint. Some people do. They do the Morg Bork deans. They do great. I think that's wonderful. I think that's a tremendous community, right?
Yep.
For me, it's a marathon, and I just kind of internalize that every problem that I meet is just something I need to overcome, and I don't know what those problems are yet. So there's no expectation. Just keep doing what I'm doing, learn as I go, do my best to kind of take in all the great advice that people are more than willing to share. So it's been good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, basically any creative or creator type, whether you're basically it's designing or basically doing streams or basically even in lore links, basically that marketing aspect is always the hardest part, because you are always your greatest critic, and that's sometimes the hardest obstacle to overcome is no, it's okay. I just need to get this in the hands of other people and let them talk to me, as opposed to I get to stay at home and develop this all day long. It'll be perfect. It'll be great. Basically, I'm not going to show it to anybody until I've finished developing it. And basically, you're like, oh wait, now it's been 22 years, and other people have done stuff, and they've come out with things, and they published that they started with a less than perfect product, but they got it out there, and they pushed it, they marketed it, they were willing to put themselves out there and listen to feedback and take that feedback and work with people on it and improve themselves. And that's sometimes the hardest part, realizing that that's just as much a part of the process. And basically letting go is sometimes the hardest thing.
You're not wrong. Oh, it is. It can be.
Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Still there, Thomas?
You have to play test early also. Yeah. I am. Can you hear me?
Yep. You broke up a little bit in there, but you're back.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was saying I think your advisement is perfect. You want to play test early and often, because that's the only way. It's way too easy to sit down and think of every cool thing in the universe, right? It's way too easy to get lost in that. And so what I often find is sometimes I'll fall down that rabbit hole, as probably a lot of creators can. But the closer I get, I force myself to go to events because there's no turning around at that point, right? There's no like you have to come to play. The show must go on, and so you have to know, okay, well, I've got to cut it here, right? I've got to, like, what's the most important thing to get through this event, to get through this playtest session, and that really does help narrow down the scope, because scope can be it can drown you, if you're not, if you're not just making a artificial intelligent, like, prompted rehash of something. Yes, I guess I did throw a sentence, but hey, some people might like that stuff. I don't.
Man, basically, there's so much involved in basically just like basically that whole basically getting out and basically letting other people do it. But basically, like your artificial intelligence is kind of basically falls into that same trap of if you don't let basically if you just get what you think is good and perfect, and basically you're like, oh, that's basically, then you're like, aha, and I release it, and you're like, oh, why don't other people accept this as the best and perfect thing? I listened to myself and produced the best thing. And you're like, well, but basically other people had different thoughts, other people did different things, other people tweaked it differently. And basically you've got to deal with that. You've got to take what they give you, and basically and be like, okay, that's where I want my thing to go, and so I should accept that feedback, or that's not where I should go, and so, okay, basically, what does that mean? What does that basically mean for the audience, or basically targeting and things like that?
You can't take all feedback, right? You have to be selective, because all feedback, that means everybody's the chef, and the soup will not taste right. So you do have to have some. I think having game pillars and themes that you're like, okay, no matter what, these are my game pillars and these are my themes, and they're guideposts, so you can change around it. But if you find yourself straying away from your game pillars, your themes, then you really have to sit down and say, do I have the right game pillars and themes, right? Do I care more about those than I do these changes? Because otherwise you sort of get this mishmash of, like, it's just kind of everything. It's all over the place, and there's nothing really to ground the players, the storytellers, the game masters, dungeon master, whatever, right? There's nothing to ground them to sort of this common how they should be playing the game, right? It's just sort of super nebulous, right? Like, because everybody's feedback went in there, so everything's so broken, and it sort of becomes difficult to play and less fun.
Yeah. That's kind of one of the questions I have here, because the TTRPG industry has basically taken off and become what it is, where we have it's gone from being basically a basically math nerds basically conquering dungeons in their basement, or basically on the weekend basically at the game shop, basically right next to the same math nerds playing miniature warfare. It's become this much more diverse thing. Basically you have to pick basically, like you're talking about game pillars and that, you kind of have to pick a demographic you're aiming for with your product. You have to be like, this is where this is what I want my product to be. These are the types of people I feel my product will appeal to, and there are types of people I feel my product will not appeal to. Basically, where do you feel your demographic in this? What do you think what do you bring to? Basically, what demographic are you kind of aiming for with Djura?
I was playtesting with my daughter and her friends, and they were, I want to say they were 11 at the time. Maybe they were 12, and they were having a lot of fun, and they understood the system, and they understood the concepts of the world, and they were okay with suspending disbelief. And they were able to play within that toolbox to do what they wanted to do, to try crazy things, right? And so, to me, I think I am looking for a group or my game is meant to be understood so that a family could play it. Now, it's not geared to where it's like, it's friendly, and you bump somebody and they get circly eyes like Pokemon, so nobody dies, right? It's not. Yep. It could be that if you want it. That's fine, right? Like, it's fine. But it is intended where people of multiple ages, because our society has grown up with animal stories, right? Wind in the Willows, Secret of NIMH, Zootopia, Kung Fu Panda, Puss in Boots, like, Peter the Fox. Like, we have a long history, and I'm barely scratching the surface, right, of anthropomorphic animals in our stories. And so, as long as a person can comprehend the system that manages who they want to be in that world, I feel as though the game's going to allow for that. Okay. Now, the question is whether or not the theme, I think that it's going to boil down to whether or not the theme, as it pairs with that system, is going to agree with that group. So far, it has. So far, sort of leading players to something that's mysterious. They want it. When they get there, they learn there's something else going on. There's something different. There's something a layer deeper. Some players bite on that, and some players are like, no, I'm walking away from that. And I think either choice is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong. You don't have to, you don't have to go to Narnia every time you open the wardrobe. Sometimes you just grab a coat. Yeah. But I think for this particular game, I am not targeting hardcore. Like, I am not targeting a hardcore audience of like role-playing game people, even though it's different now than when you and I played growing up, right? Because we have a lot of people who have created industry around some of the mainstream games, right? And so when those mainstream games do something that is counterproductive to their livelihood, they react, and they can control the narrative because they have a lot more media outlets than the mainstream games do. And so like that's why Wizards, don't take this as an offense, but like you have what is traditionally known as the greatest role-playing game in the world, Dungeons and Dragons, right? When I go on YouTube, right, and I want to listen to other people talk about TTRPG, the percentage of how to fix Dungeons and Dragons that comes up makes me think that it's the worst possible game ever designed. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay, where that's not necessarily true, right? The truth is that the people who play the game determine how much of what they do is fun or not fun, and what systems work or don't work. But like we just have this new sort of ecosystem where a lot of people for their livelihoods will rate TTRPGs, or they'll get paid by other companies, right, to review their TTRPGs. And so like it's unclear to me how much that influences whether a game is good or not. Like if you sit down and you play the game, that will tell you how much you enjoy it. The skill of the people around you who are playing it, the knowledge and skill of people playing, right, and your own, what you bring to that group, to that story. And so I'm gonna do everything in my power not to make this something that just so that they can be like, oh, this is a great game, 10 out of 10. That is not what I'm doing. If that's a mistake, then that's a mistake. I'm just trying to make the best experience that I think people will have playing as an anthropomorphic animal in a world where there's a lot of opportunity for them to do cool things and discover like layers upon layers of an interesting story and world.
That's good. Yeah, that sounds awesome. That's good. It sounds like you understand what you're going for. You have a grasp on that. You're not trying to be everything to everyone, and you're like, let's get this experience. Let's make this the best kind of experience for people who are looking for that kind of experience. And you're not being like, well, if someone else wants to show up and make this a dungeon crawler, well, they're basically, that's one of the greatest things we have in today's TTRPG is if you come to a game and you're like, you bounce off of it, you're like, oh, this theme doesn't work for me, or this mechanics doesn't work for me, or this doesn't do what I'm wanting to do, you can find another game system. There are tons out there. If you want dungeon crawling and then create them, there are games for that. If you want political rebellion, if you just want to be a 1,000-year-old vampire, if you want to be Jane Austen, you just want to hang around and hang around society, we have games for that too. Not every system has to be everything, as much as the big game, like D&D wants to be that. D&D wants to be the thing that basically they've tried to push it. They're like, no, you can do anything in D&D. You can just fudge the numbers. We've made the system generic enough. You can just play modern or play fantasy or do social stuff, and all that's in there. And you're like, well, no, actually, you can do all sorts of cool things. You just have to sometimes look outside the box you're used to.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like we are in an interesting age for tabletop role-playing games. games. I know there was some talk a month or so back about the golden age ending or whatever nonsense, right?
Yeah.
And who's to say, right? Like, who, anybody who makes a prediction eventually is wrong. So, I just think right now it is like, I think you brought up a great point. Like, there are so many wonderful ideas coming out. There's so many different types of games people can play, that you don't have to wedge it into like, well, because there's so much critical mass around this game, like we're just shoehorn in like this style of play into this, right? I don't know if playing a Call of Cthulhu game with 5e rules is ideal. But Call of Cthulhu is a really great system for doing Call of Cthulhu games, right?
Yeah,
like that's
yeah.
I have heard, and not to turn this into a podcast, but I have heard that Wizards is sort of breaking the mold from what their original roots as a tactical strategy, because that's what Dungeons and Dragons is, right? It's a tactical strategy game of discovery of dungeon. You go down, you find cooler things, so you can buy cooler things and go even deeper into the dungeons, right? Like that's the game loop for what Dungeons and Dragons was originally intended to be, not like, oh, my character's a weak thing, so I can just buy this magical doodad and now, level 1, I'm awesome, right? Like, unclear. But I heard they're changing some very core things, and I'm very curious about the impact of that for so many players out there who have, or not players, but players and game designers who have created modules or other things around the latest system. I mean, no matter what, we'd all have to change, but it seems like it's a very, if this goes through, what I heard yesterday, it'll be a pretty big departure. I think possibly even closer to what myself and Edge Studios and Renegade Studios have been doing with some of their dice pool. Like that's what it looks to me like they're trying something similar, right? They're trying to break away from just that we are a strategy tactics game, a warfare strategy tactics game.
Yeah, Dungeons and Dragons has definitely been basically like 4th edition was kind of the peak of that, and they basically like 4th edition did not sell. Basically, I would say basically it didn't sell badly. They repeatedly said no, it sold quite well, but it wasn't as well received as basically other editions, and so they basically starting with 5th edition, even from the start with the advantage disadvantage system and things like that, they were definitely trying to back it off into more of a role-playing game and less of a tactical game. More of a basically your GM is telling a story, and we provided tools for them to do it, and basically you can basically, and so it sounds like they're moving more and more, trying to move more and more down that road, because basically I think the things which have made basically D&D popular are more of the storytelling things. Basically, they're people. Basically, the demographic that's coming in isn't the math heavy one. Basically, I want to be a super tactical game. It's the I want to tell an amazing story with basically hang out with my friends and create some amazing backstories and have some cool moments and do things like that. That you essentially have to kind of fudge into 5th edition, and D&D is trying to capture that, but. It's one of those things where basically they are as a mega RPG, they're always going to try to get into that, basically get into every space. They're always going to be basically trying to edge in, basically whatever they see as popular, they're going to try to remake D&D into that. Like the reason why 4th edition kind of happened and became more tactical is because they saw how powerful and how strong and basically MMOs were becoming and things like that. And they're like, oh, what's happened to that market? Those basically WoW is huge, and computer games are huge, so tactical things are huge. So let's make D&D into that. And now they're like, oh wait, role playing is huge. Let's actually twist D&D into that. And it's again basically it comes down to that. If you either have to have a ridiculously huge production staff to allow you to do that, which they somewhat do. But in the end, basically, it comes down to you don't have to play D&D. You don't have to play Pathfinder. There are lots of cool other systems out there, like Djura, basically like, hey, let's play Anthropomorphic Animals. Can you force that into D&D? kinda, sort of, not really. You're going to do a lot of work, or you could end up with a system like it's more like what you've designed here, which supports that from the start and gives you those freedoms and gives you the opportunities and lets you see what basically, oh hey, this is what this could be like if it basically if someone designed it from the start to handle this situation, these type of things. Um, so there are lots of cool, basically indie RPGs, as it were, which are doing that, and it's great to see those spring up. And basically, like the concern with the D&D collapses and tabletop RPG collapses is, it's exaggerated. It definitely feels like it's exaggerated. It feels like it's someone's like, but if we don't have a monopoly, how do things work? Well, you just have lots of different options. It's okay. Basically, you just have to step up, and basically people have to communicate and realize and things like that. It's like basically, what if we basically can't anime survive to not only having just 3 anime series, which are the important ones out there? Like, yes, basically anime has basically become a huge industry because of the fact that anime has become so many different things, that we don't have just One Piece, Naruto, Dragon Ball, and that's all you can get in America. You can watch a whole bunch of cool stuff, and all of those different things have become popular. And it's just making sure that all those are available and accessible is going to be the key to that. And so I guess basically in terms of, if you have a really cool idea for TTRPGs and design and things like that, sit down and basically, well, I don't know, basically the question I asked Thomas may change that, but to sit down and start looking at it. There is a space for it. There are, the zine movement is really cool. Every year on Kickstarter, there's these really short kind of multiple page RPGs that come out, which do okay. Basically, they get a following and things like that as people try them. Basically, going to conventions, there are lots of cool in the RPG publishers, and then basically there's the larger systems like what you've done here of Djura, is basically a much more larger, much more detailed system that basically allows people to basically do a lot more with what you're looking at. Basically, with the idea of, oh hey, I want to be an animal. I want to be able to pick an animal and know with good confidence that, hey, you know what? There's a good chance it's already in the book. It's defined. It's set up. It sounds like you've done a great job of getting that built in and set up, and basically allowing people to kind of just jump in and run with that. But basically, I guess basically, good. Sorry.
Oh no, yeah, no. Thanks. That has been one of the most important things, is how easy can I make it for the player, right? Like, I've spent a lot of time on character sheets and abilities for that reason, because I know that's what they're going to be staring at for most of the time they're playing. So yeah, I totally.
I guess as we kind of wrap up here, basically first question is basically for people who would be looking to design their own RPG system and things like that. Is there any advice, or even just if you're talking to your younger self 10, 20 years ago, basically what advice would you give to those people looking to get into this kind of space?
Sure. No, so I designed my first tabletop role-playing game when I was 12, 13. Something like that. And I think what I did right then was I did things quick and dirty, and then we played. And just as soon as I could possibly grab people and be like, roll dice and let's try things, right? And I think that's the right way to go. If you obviously need to have people who are going to have an open mind for doing that. You don't want to come to a major convention with a napkin and some coffee-stained like things and be like, all right, guys, we're going to play a role-playing game. Because some people who come to those are looking possibly to shop you, right? To see whether or not you're open to, for publishing, or to just take your ideas, right? Or to help you with critical feedback. So you want to have like enough polish where it's legible. But not so much that you end up in development hell, where you're circling on the same idea. If you find that, just stop there. Just don't even worry about that. And when you get time to play test, you'll see where the gaps are, because players, what's wonderful about players is they're super unpredictable. It's the best part about it. Yeah, there's no way to anticipate a player, right? And so a lot of times there are things where I'm play testing the game and they do something like, nobody's tried that before. And I'll be like, let me write that down. Okay, let's make a rule. We all okay with this? Thumbs up, okay. And that's how we go. So definitely as soon as possible, find some people that you trust for their feedback and play test and play test and play test.
Awesome. Okay, and so last, basically, as we wrap up here, basically, so what's next for Djura? Basically, sounds like you've done tons of playtesting and things like that. You've done conventions. You said you could see on the horizon that there's an end in sight. What does that look like? Basically, people who have listened to this are like, hey, this is interesting. Basically, where do I go to find out more? What do I look? Basically, how do I get a hands on this? Give us your call to action, your pitch here.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I got some really great advice from Felix Isaacs, who created the Wild Seas role playing game, which is amazing. And that's to sort of create something for people to take home and play by themselves. So that's the next step, is to sort of create something online, quick and dirty, just enough to kind of like get some. Because when you write something, I've been the only person play testing it, or I'm sorry, running it as a storyteller. Sort of things that I can't conceive that other storytellers might want to know. And so getting that into their hands is sort of the next step of playtesting. So I'll be doing that along with obviously finishing up the writing of the book and the role-playing game. Mm-hmm. And so the call to action would be, if people are interested, go to turtleandphoenix.com, and follow all the social media things at the bottom. There's links for Discord and Instagram and Facebook and all of the things that I am not happy with doing, but we all gotta get on social media and post things. But you can see the tremendous work that the artists and myself have been doing to make this game, and the playtesters, right? Like it's definitely a community thing.
Awesome. So basically, look forward to hearing more about that. So basically, I definitely follow this on social media. Check this out. And we'll look forward to basically finding out more and being able to get it into our hands. And basically, in some days in the future, being able to possibly run it. Basically, possibly even here on Lorelink.
Pretty soon.
Awesome. We'll be waiting for that with bated breath. All right. So we're basically just about wrapping up here. So thank you so much for being on here. Thank you. Basically, it's been a great conversation. Been great talking with you. Basically learning about Djura. Yeah, we'll have to do it again. Do something more. Once you actually, when things are published, and get you back on here, and when you actually have the game, and either you can suffer through watching me run it, or we can have you run it. So we'll have to do that in the future. You all made words good. Thank you, social media, Tony. We have worded good. All right, basically, so.
I'm sorry. Yeah, what about Lorelink? This is a Lorelink show, right?
Yeah, I'm getting to that. I'm wrapping up my last call to action here. In terms of Lorelink. Lorelink is one of the things. That's the reason why I love talking to people like Thomas and getting indie RPGs and things like that, is because Lorelink is designed for all of these systems, all of these cool systems out there, not just D&D or Pathfinder or something like that, but basically to help GMs run these cool stories, to tell these cool stories, to get your players involved, and take some of the weight off of them. When you're dealing with a world that has all sorts of cool lore and backstory and things like that, like we've talked about here at Djura, and you're like, oh man, that sounds incredibly cool, but I have to keep track of where my players are and what mysteries they've uncovered and where they've been. Basically, it sounds like a lot of notes, and then I have to keep track of it. My handwriting is terrible, and I lose notebooks, or I have to spend hours flipping through papers looking for stuff. Basically, that's where Lorelink comes in. Lorelink is there to help you take all your notes, all your world building, all your organization, basically all that stuff you write down, organize it all together into one place, link it all together, and be able to basically proceed through your story, and do the thing that you're here to do with your players, which is to enjoy the story that you're building, and not spend a bunch of time either writing down notes or flipping through your notes, or basically panicking because you can't find X or Y, because so often you're like, oh, wait, I've got a story thing for that. Just one second, and you're just then for 2 or 3 minutes, and then people on the phone. That's when the phones start to come out, and that's always the danger. The dangerous thing at any table is. Basically, you start to lose people, looking up obscure rules and things like that, all of that. all that can detract away from it. That's what LoreLink is here for. So, basically, if you are interested in LoreLink, there's a lot of different ways you can basically keep track of it. We are currently in early access. So we're wrapping up. Basically, we've just added basically getting a lot of user feedback, listening to people, basically talking to people at conventions, demoing it, and we're taking all that. We're going back into the development minds and making changes and updating stuff. So if you're curious about, hey, I'm in the early access, basically, but I want to find out more, there are basically you can keep watching the streams like this. Basically, we have Tuesday Twitch. Basically, we have Twitch streams on Tuesdays. On a regular basis, occasionally on Mondays, where we do things like basically looking into cool new RPGs, basically either running them in LoreLink, or basically planning them in LoreLink and showing how those build out. For example, this basically later this month we are going to look into Daggerheart, which is the Critical Role's new role-playing system. We're going to take a look at that. And then possibly at the end of the month, I think I'm looking at what was the other one? Wild Sea. They're going to basically, well, you mentioned it earlier, Wild Sea, which is a really cool role-playing system that I'm hoping looking to explore with LoreLink, basically looking into planning and building out that world, because that's a really neat system and has some really cool stuff in it. And basically in between there, we'll be doing some power washing of giant Warhammer 40k stuff, and even there'll even be a guest stream in there when I duck out of town for a brief bit. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, you can follow us right here on Twitch, and that will give you alerts when we go live. If you want to support us financially, especially if you want to, you have a free Twitch Prime sub and you're looking for a place to put it, we will gladly accept your support. You can click the subscribe button here on Twitch, and basically if you dig down in the options a little bit, there's a drop down you have to go through. They've hidden it because they don't want you to easily give away free money, as it were. But there's a checkbox that lets you just for free basically pay for basically get those things, and subscribing does get you those cool Twitch emotes, as 20 has just demonstrated. Dice on Fire, Dice Jail, all those cool things which can be used both here and on other streams. On the YouTube side, if you've enjoyed it over there, you can like the video, you can follow, you can subscribe to us on YouTube, which doesn't cost you any money because YouTube uses different terminology. It's not confusing at all. But basically subscribing on YouTube will let you know when we have videos like that, videos on our channel like these live streams, or if we do tutorial videos and things like that. As we go, basically as we get closer to going live, those videos will start showing up on that. If you want more more day-to-day things, more interesting questions, and connect with other people interested in TTRPGs, you can follow us on our social media accounts. We have Blue Sky, we have Facebook, we have Instagram. We've got cool art, basically cool images up on Instagram and things like that. And if you're like, I don't want to interact with social media at all, but I still want to keep informed, we do have a monthly newsletter which takes all of that information we cram into basically the Twitch streams and social media things and development and all of that basically in one place, and that basically lets you sign up for that. And once a month, it'll just drop that in your email inbox, and you don't have to interact with social media, which basically our social media manager will tell you is a blessing. So all of that to say, there's so many different ways you can support and find out. Basically, of course, definitely go over and basically do all those same things over on Turtle and Phoenix basically channel as well. Their YouTube, their Facebook, and Instagram and Twitter. I know they have all those, and they have the website. So definitely check them out as well. So all that to say, thanks so much for watching. Thanks, Thomas, for being on here. Thanks for talking. It's been a great talk. And we will catch you all later.
Lots of fun.